Title: The 250 Mills and Thousand Ghost Tower. How a 45-story waterfront skyscraper rotted on China's Golden Coast roll visuals. Fast-paced, high-contrast drone footage slicing through thick morning fog over a sprawling Chinese megacity. The camera pans down a glittering wall of modern glass skyscrapers, then abruptly locks onto a massive, stained, decaying concrete monolith. Windows are shattered. Slabs of premium stone are visibly peeling off the facade. Severe, urgent bass drops in the background music. Narrator VO. Look closely at this skyline. To the untrained eye, it looks like the ultimate monument to the 21st century economic miracle. A multi-billion-dollar forest of steel and glass. But right in the beating heart of this central business district sits a 162-meter structural nightmare that has been dead for exactly 24 years. This is the Shengxi Plaza Tower, a 45-story megastructure that once stood proudly as the absolute tallest architectural marvel on this stretch of the coast. Today, it is 531 feet of raw, unadulterated liability hanging over one of the most densely populated pedestrian intersections in the province. A ticking time bomb located just a single block away from where millions of international tourists gathered for the massive cultural expo last year. Graphic on screen. 3 massive, glowing red numbers stamp onto the screen with a loud metallic thud. 24,500,000. 210,000. Consider these 3 numbers, 0.24. The number of years this tower has sat completely sealed, dark, and abandoned. It has been a ghost for longer than some of the young professionals walking past its base have been alive. Yo 1,500,000. The staggering daily structural non-compliance and safety fines that municipal authorities eventually piled onto the developer for refusing to secure the perimeter, and 210 mills and thousand. The mind-boggling amount of public capital it will cost just to safely demolish and erase this structural from the earth. Sit with that economic ratio for a single second. It will cost the local municipal construction commission roughly 10 times more money to safely tear this building down than the entire structure is officially valued at by the local tax asset bureau. So, how does a luxury mega project that was designed to define an entire provincial skyline become the single most expensive mistake in a city's portfolio? A vertical wasteland that nobody can fix, nobody can sell, and nobody can even safely knock down. Upbeat, urgent cable news music intensive. It all began in the hyper-confident development boom of the late 20th century. The year was 1994. A visionary local tycoon named Zhang Resai stepped onto the scene with a promise that captivated the Municipal Planning Bureau. Zhang didn't want to build just another generic, functional office block. He wanted to build the definitive architectural icon of the region, the tallest tower the city had ever seen. A soaring statement of premium marble and custom glass curtain walls that would drag the local district directly into the modern global era to turn this grand vision into reality. Zhang hired a prestigious design firm led by a prominent chief architect who had trained directly under international masters of organic architecture. On paper, it was flawless. It was exactly the kind of unbridled engineering ambition a rapidly urbanizing Chinese Tier 1 hub was supposed to showcase to the world. And for a brief, glorious moment, the ambition paid off. When the structural core of the Shengxi Plaza Tower finally topped out, it broke every local altitude record. It wasn't just a high-rise. It was a 45-story beacon of progress. But here's the dark secret the glossy marketing brochures completely omitted. This engineering icon almost didn't get built at all. In October 1996, with the concrete structural skeleton only partway up the sky, the core capital evaporated. The funding dried up overnight. Construction simply froze. For months, a raw, exposed concrete skeleton stood completely paralyzed over the central business district, a hollow gray monument to over-leverage. The project desperately changed hands behind closed doors until a new consortium of regional investors bought out the debt, restarted the heavy machinery in 1998, and pushed the build through to completion in late 1999. Think about what that baseline history tells you. Before a single commercial tenant ever signed a lease, before a single worker moved into a cubicle, this skyscraper had already exposed its fundamental flaw to the world. Its architectural ambition was vastly bigger than its bank account. That structural gap between what the Shangxi Plaza Tower was meant to be and what anyone could actually afford to maintain is the literal crack that runs through this entire narrative. For a few years, the structural flaws stayed quiet. The tower filled with premium corporate offices. Local administrative branches and municipal maritime agencies moved into the upper tiers. The district's municipal prosecution office set up its high-tech headquarters across 3 entire floors. By the early 2000s, the grand dream of a glamorous mixed-use luxury icon had quietly settled into what most commercial skyscrapers eventually become: a dense, functional stack of fluorescent-lit corporate cubicles. It wasn't glamorous, but it generated millions in monthly rental yield. And then, the building began to poison its occupants. By the dawn of 2002, white-collar employees inside the Shangxi Plaza Tower began reporting severe, systemic health anomalies. Chronic headaches, acute respiratory distress, and sudden fatigue. At first, these complaints were dismissed by management as standard office fatigue. But the symptoms multiplied exponentially. The true culprits turned out to be 2 of the most dangerous words in civil engineering and commercial real estate: degraded insulation asbestos and toxic black moisture mold. To understand the sheer scale of the disaster that followed, you need to understand one critical rule of building material science. The engineering danger with structural asbestos isn't the material sitting completely still and sealed behind a solid concrete wall. The true catastrophe occurs when the binding agents degrade, causing the material to become friable, meaning it turns dry, brittle, and crumbles into microscopic airborne fibers at the slightest touch. A perfectly maintained, climate-controlled luxury tower keeps that hazardous material hermetically sealed and stable. A severely neglected tower, where external water is actively breaching the outer skin year after year, does the exact opposite. It triggers a chemical decay that turns the building's own internal fireproofing insulation into a toxic dust that anyone inside will inhale with every breath. And the Shangxi Plaza Tower was leaking catastrophically from its upper glass joints. Water was pouring past the substandard sealants during every heavy coastal rainstorm. The tower was, in the most literal engineering sense, breaking down from the inside out. Consequently, in mid-2002, the Municipal Housing Bureau intervened. In a matter of days, a sweeping evacuation order was handed down. Around 700 high-ranking state, municipal, and legal employees, including the entire district prosecution team, packed their files into boxes and walked out of the building en masse. Relocating to temporary offices across the city, the main breakers were flipped. The heavy security doors were chained shut. The city told the public that this shutdown was merely a temporary environmental remediation pause. Now, ask yourself the exact same question that the municipal planners should have asked 24 years ago. You possess a 45-story, structurally intact tower in the absolute prime economic zone of a major metropolis. It has been emptied solely due to a localized environmental hazard that, with targeted capital and professional engineering effort, can absolutely be abated and scrubbed clean. What is the logical, responsible move? The responsible move is to deploy capital instantly. To fix the seals, scrub the shafts, and remediate the interior before an empty building degrades into a rotting building. Because make no mistake, those are 2 entirely different physical states. An empty building is merely paused. A rotting building is actively dying. And the terrifying difference between the 2 is measured entirely in the one asset nobody wanted to invest: immediate maintenance capital and time. The ownership consortiums chose to wait. They chose to litigate, to stall, and to pass the buck. And that choice to wait turned out to be the most expensive engineering mistake in the modern history of the district. A roll visuals. Macro lens close-up of water droplets dripping rapidly from a rusted iron pipe, splashing onto a waterlogged concrete floor. Cut to a highly detailed 3D blueprint animation of the Shangxi Plaza Tower. The animation highlights the building's outer skin in bright blue, then flashes angry red warning lines penetrating the glass joints to show systemic moisture infiltration. Technical data points, millimeters of shifting, moisture percentages, and load metrics. Scroll rapidly down the side of the screen. Narrator. VO. But here is the engineering revelation that the local property market buried for nearly 2 decades. The asbestos and the black toxic mold. The absolute official reasons why this 45-story giant was evacuated and chained shut in 2002 were actually completely eradicated years ago. Authorized environmental records reveal that specialized containment crews thoroughly scrubbed the ventilation shafts, stripped the degraded insulation, and certified the structural core as environmentally clean, which means for the vast majority of the last 20 years, the tower's public excuse for standing as a dead, hollow shell over the central business district no longer even existed. So, if the internal poison was officially gone, why did the Shengxi Plaza Tower continue to rot right before the eyes of millions? Because stripping out hazardous insulation is the cheap part of structural engineering. Turning a completely gutted 45-story concrete husk back into a living, pressurized, climate-controlled commercial ecosystem is the brutal logistical challenge that has financially broken every single developer who has dared to touch it. Graphic on screen, a rapid timeline grid appearing over a satellite map of the district, marking failed development years 2006, 2009, 2012, 2014, and desperate developers certainly tried. Over the years, a revolving door of investment syndicates stepped up, each introducing grand, multi-million yuan engineering blueprints to the Municipal Construction Commission. First came a plan for ultra-luxury residential condos, rebranding the dead monument with a glittering new Mandarin name and an ultra-modern, double-glazed glass curtain wall. Then came proposals for a massive high-density micro-apartment complex, followed by a luxury 5-star business hotel and a multi-tiered automated parking deck at the base. Exquisite 3D architectural renderings were splashed across real estate expos. Confident corporate press releases were broadcast to regional media. Each and every milestone promised that this time, the Shengxi Plaza Tower would finally claw its way back to life. And each and every milestone collapsed into bankruptcy before a single internal floor plate could be finished. Why? Because a skyscraper is not a passive stack of concrete. It is a highly complex dynamic engineering organism. When a high-rise structure is left unheated, unventilated, and completely unpressurized in a humid, typhoon-prone coastal climate for decades, the physical toll compounds exponentially. Let's look at the hard engineering data. Without a functioning HVAC system regulating internal air pressure and moisture levels, the tower became an open thermodynamic trap. Every single afternoon, solar radiation baked the exterior glass and concrete, while the ocean air brought intense humidity. This created a severe solar pumping effect, drawing moisture deep into the porous structural concrete. The structural engineering chronology of this building is a masterclass in slow-motion decay. When municipal structural inspectors from the Regional Academy of Building Research finally managed to conduct a secret, comprehensive assessment inside the sealed perimeter, the technical data they uncovered was staggering. Because of the prolonged water infiltration from the roof drains down through the core, the structural slabs had suffered extensive carbonation. Carbonation occurs when carbon dioxide from the atmosphere penetrates deep into concrete, reacting with calcium hydroxide and radically lowering the pH level of the material. Once the concrete's pH drops below a critical threshold, the protective alkaline layer surrounding the internal steel rebar completely dissolves. The moment that protective barrier is gone, the steel begins to rust. And when steel rebar rusts, it expands up to 6 times its original volume. This internal volumetric expansion exerts immense tensile pressure on the surrounding concrete from the inside out, leading to massive, systemic concrete spalling. The building's own structural bones were literally bursting apart under the pressure of their own internal corrosion. Graphic on screen, engineering diagram showing the cross-section of a concrete beam, illustrating spalling force with arrows pushing outward until the concrete cracks. But the engineering nightmare didn't stop at the interior structural columns. The real public danger was brewing on the tower's iconic facade. The original 1994 design called for massive, heavy slabs of premium white marble to be mechanically anchored across the exterior of the lower and middle tiers. In the late 1990s, These stone panels were held in place using standard steel pin anchors and industrial mortar. However, 24 years of constant thermal cycles, where temperatures fluctuated rapidly between blistering summer heat and freezing winter winds, caused the stone and the steel anchors to expand and contract at completely different rates. This differential movement, paired with the constant corrosive salt spray from the nearby coast, completely compromised the integrity of the mechanical anchors. The heavy structural mortar turned to dust. The steel pins rusted into brittle wires. The magnificent marble facade of the tallest building in the province was no longer safely attached to the building. It was merely resting there, held up by gravity and luck, waiting for a strong enough gust of wind to turn a premium architectural statement into a volley of high-velocity, ground-directed kinetic missiles. Every single day the city waited. The structural tolerances of those hanging marble slabs drifted closer to absolute zero. Then came 2014. A major regional hotel magnate named Joe Yeager, a heavy-hitting billionaire with an immense portfolio of operational luxury properties across the country, stepped forward to acquire the distressed asset. Yeager wasn't a speculative paper developer. He was a serious corporate builder with deep lines of bank credit and massive local influence. Just a year prior to his acquisition, the tower had been successfully designated as a protected regional historic landmark by the Provincial Heritage Bureau. This wasn't just a vanity title. It was a highly calculated financial maneuver. The landmark status unlocked hundreds of millions of yuan in lucrative historic preservation tax credits and municipal development subsidies. Yeager's engineer blueprint was massive: 90 high-end executive apartments, a 200-room luxury boutique hotel, and a modern, reinforced multi-floor parking podium at the base. It was the familiar, glittering high-rise dream one more time, and once more. The reality of the engineering physics crashed into the balance sheet when Yeager's engineering teams began conducting deep core drills into the structural columns to assess if the building could handle the structural deadload of the new Hotel Layu. They discovered the true price of 2 decades of absolute inaction. The subsurface pressure had traveled down to the foundational piles, and subtle, localized soil settlement had begun to create micro-measurable angles of deflection across the upper floors. The cost to structurally reinforce every single compromised concrete beam, to completely replace the entire exterior glass and stone curtain wall, and to upgrade the building to meet the modern seismic and fire safety codes of the Municipal Construction Commission, didn't just double the budget. It pushed the required investment capital completely off the charts. Years melted away with absolutely zero meaningful physical renovation inside the perimeter. The grand historic tax credits sat completely unused, while lawyers and corporate accountants argued over the viability of the structural remediation in boardroom meetings. The physical, material cost of all that bureaucratic inaction stopped being a theoretical equation on a balance sheet. It spilled over directly into the real world, onto the crowded public streets below. Roll visuals, dramatic, high-contrast satellite imagery zooming down into China's booming eastern seaboard, highlighting major cities like Shanghai, Tianjin, and Guangzhou. Red glowing markers drop onto specific locations of documented structural engineering failures. The screen splits into a multi-window analysis grid displaying structural cross-sections, thermal drone scans of failing facades, and slow-motion video of glass panel stress tests. Narrator, VO. To truly understand the engineering crisis of the Shengxi Plaza Tower, you have to look beyond a single coastal intersection. This isn't an isolated anomaly born out of local bad luck. It is the extreme manifestation of a systemic structural phenomenon that has challenged engineering commissions across China's most explosive development zones. When you accelerate through 40 years of hyper-urbanization, pushing the absolute limits of material science and construction speed, the laws of physics eventually demand an accounting. The Shengxi Plaza Tower is simply the tallest, most dramatic symptom of a broader, high-altitude structural struggle. Take a look at the massive coastal mega-hubs like the Pudong New Area in Shanghai or the hyper-dense financial districts of Shenzhen. These global economic engines are built entirely on a foundation of cutting-edge structural engineering. But they are also built on complex delta soils, reclaimed coastal land, and silty riverbeds. In these environments, when a massive structure like the 45-story Shengxi Tower is left unmaintained, it encounters structural adversaries that inland developments never have to face. The first and most ruthless adversary is localized soil settlement and the shifting of subsurface foundational piles. Throughout the major construction booms across the Pearl River Delta and the Yangtze River Delta, megastructures require massive friction piles driven up to 80 meters deep into the earth just to strike stable bedrock. If a tower's structural core is dynamically pressurized, sealed, and continuously monitored by modern facility management systems, subtle shifting can be managed through advanced structural engineering counterweights and ground grouting stabilization. But when a 162-meter concrete monument stands completely dark and unmonitored for 24 years, the hydrology of the soil continues to move beneath it. Variations in the local water table, often caused by nearby subway line, tunneling, or adjacent deep foundation commercial builds, can cause uneven settlement if one side of a high-rise foundation settles just a few millimeters more than the other. It introduces a terrifying phenomenon known as secondary structural moments. The massive vertical gravity load of those 45 concrete floors begins to warp, creating immense tensile stress on structural elements that were designed exclusively to handle pure compression. Graphic on screen. A 3D wireframe model of a high-rise building, exaggerating a 2-degree lean. Bright red stress lines illuminate across the lower structural columns, accompanied by a digital readout. Tensile stress threshold exceeded. We have seen variations of this high-rise engineering struggle play out across the country's most ambitious skylines. Consider the infamous structural panic that gripped the 73-story Seg Plaza in Shenzhen in 2021. That towering skyscraper suddenly began to shake and vibrate on a clear afternoon, forcing thousands of people to evacuate the central business district in real time. While that specific crisis was eventually traced back to a complex vortex-induced vibration caused by roof-mounted mass structures and thermal winds rather than a rot. ING core. It taught the entire engineering world a critical lesson. A skyscraper is a hypersensitive structural instrument. It reacts constantly to its environment, and any unaddressed engineering flaw will scale up exponentially as it travels up the vertical column. Then look further north to the Binhai area in Tianjin, home to massive financial centers and ambitious luxury skyscrapers. Across these coastal mudflats, structural engineers have long warned about the devastating effects of salt spray carbonation and glass curtain wall fatigue. The Shengxi Plaza Tower was built right on the front line of this harsh marine environment. Its outer skin wasn't a modern, unitized, triple-glazed thermal barrier. It was an early-generation, stick-built glass curtain wall combined with heavy, hand-anchored stone in standard civil engineering. The lifespan of the silicone sealants and structural adhesives used to hold high-rise glass panels and stone anchors in place is roughly 15 to 20 years. And that is under ideal maintenance conditions, in a tower left completely abandoned to elements. Without building maintenance units washing away salt crystals or technicians replacing brittle gaskets, the breakdown is devastating. The high salinity coastal wind actively eats away at the structural silicon, turning a flexible waterproof barrier into a dry, chalky powder. Graphic on screen. Side-by-side engineering comparison. Left, well-maintained structural silicone joint. Right, corroded, salt-damaged joint, showing structural delamination. This exact mechanism was major municipal construction bureaus across China have implemented incredibly strict rolling inspections for aging skyscrapers. If a building's envelope fails, it doesn't just damage the interior, it threatens everything within a 100-meter radius. In a high-density, urban center, a single square meter of tempered glass or premium marble, falling from a height of 150 meters, hits the pavement with the destructive kinetic force of an artillery shell. The Shengxi Plaza Tower had effectively become a 531-foot vertical cliff face of unmaintained. eroding geological material looming directly over a bustling Tier 1 metropolitan transport grid. It joined a notorious, unofficial roster of properties that urban planners quietly refer to as the stalled giants, unfinished, or completely abandoned megablocks that ran out of momentum or clear legal titles during past economic transitions. These structures become architectural ghosts, caught in a permanent structural limbo, where they are too massive to easily re-engineer, too expensive to purchase, and too structurally dangerous to ignore. Every single year, the Shangxi Tower sat silent. Its internal structural data drifted further away from the safety margins certified by the China Academy of Building Research. The Municipal Construction Commission found itself staring down a legal and logistical labyrinth. They were dealing with a structurally compromised, privately owned skyscraper whose internal reinforcement bars were actively delaminating, whose external facade was losing its mechanical grip, and whose billionaire owner refused to sell or invest the massive capital required to stabilize the structural skin. The city was trapped in a high-stakes game of engineering roulette, and in May of 2021, the structural tolerances finally gave out. The roulette wheel stopped spinning, and the physical consequences of a 20-year delay came crashing down onto the concrete of the city below. Roll visuals, dramatic, handheld street-level footage shot from a smartphone, capturing a chaotic scene on a rain-slicked urban avenue in China. Screams are heard off-camera as security personnel rush to erect emergency barriers. The camera pans up to show a gaping wound on the side of the Shangxi Plaza Tower, a section where the premium marble skin has completely sheared off. Cut to a highly detailed 3D structural breakdown animation showing a marble slab accelerating through the air, tracking its terminal velocity and impact force. Narrator, VO. May 2021. A powerful seasonal gale tears across the coastal metropolitan district, funnel high-velocity winds directly through the narrow canyons of the central business district. At the intersection of Huaihai Road and Zhongshan Avenue, one of the absolute busiest transit corridors in the entire city, hundreds of commuters are navigating the evening rush hour. Among them is a local tech worker named Li Wei, simply riding his electric bicycle home after a long shift. He has traveled this exact route every day for 5 years, entirely accustomed to the looming, dark presence of the 45-story Shangxi Plaza Tower. To Li Wei, the building was just a harmless, empty eyesore. He was dead wrong. High above the street, on the 32nd floor of the rotting tower, a single, massive slab of premium white marble, weakened by 24 years of internal rebar expansion, rusted structural pins, and completely eroded mechanical mortar, finally loses its decades-long battle with gravity. The gale-force wind gets right behind the panel, prying it away from the concrete core like a crowbar. The heavy stone slab shears off completely. It rolls into the open air and plummets 100 meters down toward the crowded sidewalk, accelerating to terminal velocity in a matter of seconds. Loud shattering sound effect. The impact is catastrophic. The marble slab slams into the asphalt, shattering into a violent explosion of high-velocity stone shrapnel. A large fragment strikes Li Wei, throwing him completely off his bicycle and fracturing his shoulder and leg instantly. If he had been riding just half a meter to the left, the impact would have been fatal, within minutes. The municipal emergency services flood the scene. The local district fire rescue division and the Municipal Construction Commission realize they are staring at an unprecedented public safety nightmare. This isn't just an isolated piece of loose debris. A thermal drone scan deployed by the emergency response team immediately reveals that dozens of adjacent marble panels across the tower's weathered facade have completely detached from the structural backing. They are literally floating in place, held up by nothing more than the friction of the surrounding panels. The city has no choice but to declare an immediate structural emergency zone. Authorities order the complete, indefinite closure of major arterial avenues surrounding the base of the tower. Public transport networks are rerouted, and thousands of nearby commercial businesses are forced to adjust their operations as heavy steel scaffolding and protective wooden canopies are hastily erected across the pedestrian walkways. The economic heart of the district is effectively paralyzed. the Shengxi Plaza Tower has officially graduated from a quiet corporate finance problem into an active, immediate physical danger to millions of citizens. Graphic on screen. A digital receipt or fine assessment sheet stamps down, flashing red text. Total fine imposed, 25,000. Status, insignificant. And how did the regulatory systems respond to the billionaire developer who had allowed a 531-foot high-rise to turn into a vertical civilian launch pad? This is the part of the engineering chronology that should make your blood boil. Following the public injury and the emergency closure of the city's main avenues, the Municipal Housing Bureau reviewed the code violations. They tallied up 11 separate, severe structural maintenance infractions. The total penalty slapped onto Joe Yeager's development group? A grand total of around 25,000 yuan. Think about that number. To the ultra-wealthy owner of a prime downtown real estate portfolio, a 25,000 yuan fine isn't a regulatory deterrent. It isn't a penalty. It is a rounding error. It is the cost of a single corporate dinner. By treating a structurally failing, peeling marble skyscraper with the same bureaucratic urgency as an overgrown lawn or an unpermitted street sign, the regulatory framework allowed the decay to compound even further. But the physical degradation of the tower was accelerating past the speed of the lawsuits. Just months after the marble collapse, another crisis strikes the interior. Trespassers slipping past the porous security perimeter accidentally trigger a localized electrical fire within the lower utility podium because the tower's fire suppression systems had been completely drained and deactivated decades prior. The fire rescue crews are forced to execute a high-risk manual breach of a building packed with decayed interior structures and unknown toxic mold pockets. Then comes the true human tragedy. Despite the Municipal Construction Commission erecting heavy barricades, the dark, unmonitored interior of the towering monument becomes a magnet for urban explorers and vulnerable individuals. In late 2022, a local man manages to scale the lower scaffolding, entering the unlit, rotting elevator shafts. He plummets several floors through a rusted structural opening. His body is discovered days later by a security detail. The loss of life changes the entire calculus of the city's legal strategy. The Shengxi Plaza Tower can no longer be allowed to exist in its current state. The municipal administration completely runs out of patience. The district inspector general publicly calls out Yeager's Development Consortium, publishing an explicit engineering report stating that there had been absolutely zero capital investment or physical effort to structurally stabilize or renovate the property for more than 6 consecutive years. Graphic on screen. An animated financial ledger showing the accumulation of municipal costs, barricade installation, 12 million. Lost parking revenue, 8,500,000. Total lien, 20,500,000. The city slaps a massive, 8-figure structural lien onto the title of the building to forcibly recover the immense public capital spent installing the heavy protective barricades, managing the street closures, and compensating the local district for the millions in lost commercial parking revenue around the blocked-off base. And then, when the developer continues to ignore the financial liens, the city council escalates the situation to the absolute nuclear option, total structural demolition. In December 2024, the Municipal Construction Commission signs a definitive, multi-million yuan emergency engineering contract with Renaissance Engineering, a highly specialized structural abatement firm. Their mandate? To begin immediate hazardous material containment and execute a full forensic structural assessment to prepare the 45-story tower for complete implosion or top-down deconstruction. The estimated price tag, floated by civil engineers just to safely erase this quarter-mile of concrete from the tight urban grid? A staggering 210 million yuan. Predictably, the developer's legal team strike back instantly. In January 2025, they file a sweeping emergency restraining order in the Intermediate Provincial Court, attempting to block the wrecking crews from touching the private asset, claiming the property still possesses immense residual real estate value. But the judiciary has seen enough. The presiding judge sides completely with the municipal authorities, issuing a historic ruling. that the structural degradation of the Shangxi Plaza Tower constitutes an imminent, ongoing risk to the lives of the public. The injunction is thrown out. The path is cleared for the engineers. A roll visuals. Brett tracking. Tense footage of specialized structural engineers in full safety harnesses, rappelling down the steep stained exterior of the skyscraper. They use specialized hammers to tap the concrete, recording data on digital tablets, as wind violently whips their ropes. Within a matter of weeks, the central business district witnesses an incredible engineering spectacle. Teams of industrial high-altitude rope technicians and structural engineers begin rappelling down the massive face of the tower like mountain climbers scaling a sheer rock cliff. Equipped with ground-penetrating radar, ultrasonic testing devices, and structural mapping tablets, they scale the entire 531-foot exterior, floor by floor, mapping out every single compromised column, every rusted rebar network, and every detached marble panel. They are drafting the ultimate battle plan for how to safely take a quarter-mile of rotten, high-density concrete apart in the middle of a bustling Tier 1 metropolis without bringing down the surrounding subway lines and adjacent luxury glass towers along with it. The demolition plans are finalized. The heavy machinery is positioned at the base. The public prepares for the spectacular destruction of a 24-year-old mistake. And then, right on the precipice of the final countdown, the wrecking crews suddenly stop. The heavy machinery goes completely silent. The city pauses the entire demolition, because behind the closed doors of the Municipal Planning Bureau, a shocking, sudden twist has just occurred. One that completely upends the entire 20-year narrative and changes the fate of the skyline forever. A roll visuals. Dramatic low-angle tracking shot of the silent, looming Shangxi Plaza Tower, silhouetted against a deep crimson sunset. The chaotic city traffic blurs past its base in a time-lapse. The urgent, pulsing electronic music shifts into a more calculated, dramatic, and revelation-heavy tone. Infographics on screen map out a complex corporate handoff with arrows moving from the original developer to a new consortium. Narvio. So, who is actually accountable for this multi-million yuan monument to absolute inertia? When you peel back the layers of this engineering saga, you find an uncomfortable truth. There isn't just one singular corporate villain to blame. Instead, it is a flawless, unbroken chain of systemic accountability failures. It tracks all the way back to a developer whose grand architectural ambition outran his actual lines of bank credit in 1996. It includes a rotating door of investment syndicates across 4 distinct decades who repeatedly promised structural revival, yet delivered nothing but glossy 3D renderings and empty promotional brochures. It directly convicts a billionaire owner who sat on a decaying, high-altitude liability for 10 consecutive years, while municipal code fines remained laughably, predictably small. And finally, it exposes a regulatory framework that treated a structurally unraveling, peeling marble skyscraper with the exact same urgency as an overgrown lawn or a minor sidewalk violation, until innocent citizens actually started getting hurt. And as it always does in these hyper-dense structural disasters, the massive financial aftermath lands squarely on the shoulders of the public. The fines levied against the private corporation were largely symbolic. The emergency barricades, the high-altitude drone inspections, the forensic structural assessments, and the potential 210 million yuan demolition price tag represent an immense, multi-million yuan exposure of public tax capital for a high-rise tower that was being taxed by the Asset Bureau as if it were worth practically nothing. Which brings us to the current status of the monument. After all of that legal warfare, after the soaring daily fines, the historic court victories, and the arrival of specialized high-altitude wrecking crews, the city abruptly halted the demolition. Before I reveal how this ultimate engineering standoff ends, there is one critical, paradigm-shifting detail that changes absolutely everything. The single, tectonic event that finally broke a 20-year structural stalemate across the district's central business district wasn't an innovative legal breakthrough, a massive new municipal fine, or a sweeping court order. It was a sudden death. Graphic on screen, a stark, dramatic newspaper headline graphic fading into view. prominent real estate magnate Joe Yeager fatally injured in sudden highway collision. In June 2024, Joe Yeager, the billionaire hotel magnate who had held a vice grip on the title deeds of this tower for a decade, stubbornly refusing to let it go or fund its remediation, was suddenly killed in a violent automobile accident on a regional highway. And that is the dramatic twist that this entire 24-year engineering saga completely turns on. For 10 full years, absolutely nothing could budge the Shangxi Plaza Tower from its state of slow-motion rot, because one single man flatly refused to sell the asset on economic terms that any rational market buyer would ever accept. His sudden passing didn't end the building's story. It completely unlocked it. His vast estate rapidly transitioned into the hands of a court-appointed corporate trustee, immediately did the one thing that Yeager never would have permitted while he was alive. In the chaotic market summer of 2025, they put the dead tower on the auction block, and they sold it. The corporate buyer? A massive, highly capitalized, affordable housing developer based out of a booming technology hub across the country, partnering directly with a localized municipal urban renewal investment vehicle. Together, they stepped forward into the planning bureau with a staggering, fully funded 1.7 billion yuan structural resurrection blueprint. Graphic on screen, side-by-side engineering transition. Left, the stained, ruined concrete core of the old tower. Right, a state-of-the-art, green, energy-efficient senior housing complex integrated with vertical gardens and modern structural bracing. Their engineering objective is to completely bypass the demolition phase. Instead, they plan to systematically strip the remaining loose stone facade, reinforce every single carbonated concrete column with advanced carbon fiber polymer wraps, install a cutting-edge structural monitoring matrix, and convert the rotting 45-story shell into a highly functional, state-of-the-art residential complex featuring over 300 modern, subsidized apartments specifically designated for low-income seniors and retired municipal workers. Follow the complete, dizzying circle of this structural narrative. The exact same megastructure that the entire city fought desperately for decades to erase from the skyline is now the exact same building that the Municipal Construction Commission is fighting to structurally salvage and protect. The ultimate urban eyesore is being re-engineered into the ultimate community rescue. And the one single catalyst that finally made this engineering of marvel a physical reality was the permanent loss of the man who held the keys to the vault. A skyscraper that absolutely could not be saved while its billionaire owner was breathing was saved, perhaps, only because he was not. Here is what the tragic epic of the Shangxi Plaza Tower really teaches us about the built environment. It is the definitive material proof that doing absolutely nothing is never free. Every single year, an administration lets a massive high-rise structure rot because funding the engineering fix feels too expensive at the moment. The physical bill does not magically disappear. The laws of thermodynamics and material degradation do not care about corporate litigation. The cost simply compounds in the dark, year after year, until a ruined, worthless concrete husk requires nearly $250 million of intensive capital to either safely erase or bring back from the dead. So, let's open this up to the engineering community down below. When a municipal administration allows an iconic skyline landmark to die this slowly in the middle of a Tier 1 city, who should be legally forced to pay to undo the damage? The private developers who walked away with the early corporate profits, or the public transit commuters left holding the keys to a falling building? Drop your technical insights, your thoughts on structural carbonation, and your view on this rescue plan in the comments section down below. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more deep dives into the world's most expensive engineering disasters, and we will see you in the next breakdown.